everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Looks like folks are trickling in. Oh, I see some familiar names. I think I met some of you guys at the family retreat weekend, Camp Fantastic, a couple months ago. Our speaker actually was one of the presenters there, so you may recognize her as well. So welcome everyone to our September Tourette Talk. My name is Alina Osborne. I'm the program coordinator for NJCTS, and I'm just going to go over a couple of guidelines and upcoming events before I introduce our talk and our speaker. So first of all, if you are comfortable, you can feel free to keep yourself on camera. Please stay muted during the presentation portion, but feel free to send any thoughts, questions, and comments to the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them in our questions and answers around 7:45. The recording will end at the Q&A, so feel free to unmute and turn your camera on, and you can ask your questions directly to our speaker, Dr. Jiang, or you can send them to me over the chat, and we will get to as many of them as we can. Okay, so my PowerPoint's not working. Come on, there we go. All right, sorry about that. Jeez. All right, so a couple of upcoming events. We have a Family Fun Day coming up in October, on Saturday, October 7th. Katie, my colleague, will be sending all of these links to the chat. If you guys are interested, please check them out later, and the registrations are all on our website. The next parent support group is Wednesday, October 11th. Our next community connections for young adults with Tourette syndrome is going to be an in-person meeting on Saturday, October 21st. The registration is not up on the website yet, but it will be soon. And next month, our Tourette Talk, Ensuring Success of Neurodiverse Students in the Classroom, will be October 26th at 7 o'clock. So we hope to see you there. And let me end my screen share one moment. There we go. So thank you again for coming to our September Tourette Talk, Navigating School Accommodations and 504 Plans for Children with Tourette's and Other Teeth Disorders, presented by Dr. Jiang. Like I said before, she was one of our speakers at the Camp Fantastic Family Retreat Weekend over the summer, so you might recognize her if you were there. Dr. Jiang earned her Doctorate of Psychology her Doctorate of Psychology degree from Rutgers University and Master's degree in Early Childhood Special Education and Bilingual Education from Columbia University. She is a dedicated school psychologist with expertise in learning difficulties, behavioral challenges, developmental disabilities, giftedness, and special education. She founded the 3E Center to provide critical support for families with exceptional children from diverse cultural backgrounds. And just one disclaimer before I turn the session over to Dr. Jiang. Please note that the New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome and Associated Disorders and its directors and employees assume no responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, objectivity, or usefulness of the information presented here today. We do not endorse any recommendations or opinion made by any member, presenter, or physician, nor do we advocate for any treatment. You are responsible for your own medical decisions. The presenters are providing general information and not any therapy or other health services. Thank you. And without further ado, Dr. Jiang.
All right, thanks, Alina. Let me share my screen. You guys see this okay? Alina, okay. Oh,
yes.
Great. Yeah, welcome everybody. So let me kind of talk about why we kind of came up with this topic. It's, September is the beginning of the school year. We often think about, parents can do what we want. We have kind of more control over what we can do at home. But when our children are in school, sometimes we have to really work with the school and we don't really know what exactly is going on. So we thought that it would be helpful, in September that we talk about how, what's happening in school and what we can do to really help our kids to kind of manage their tics better in school. And why I kind of came up, I want to talk about this. Another reason is that, so before I became a school psychologist, I was actually a special education teacher. So I was trained at Columbia University to be a special education teacher. So I worked in school for like many, many years. So like during my work in school, I would see these kids with tics or Tourette syndrome, and I kind of work really like very hands-on work to see how, we can accommodate them. That's really beneficial for them, right? There are a lot of accommodations that are available, but what really works for our children. And my, why would I know NJCTS is that our partnership really began when I was working at the Tourette Syndrome Clinic at Rutgers University, which is actually a partnership between Rutgers and New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome. And so I worked there for 2 years, and that's how I kind of got to know these wonderful people at NJCTS, and they're always amazing. And this is such a amazing community that I'm always just really happy to spend time with them and parents. On top of that, I'm also a certified CBIT provider. So I don't know how well you guys know about this. CBIT is Comprehensive Behavior Intervention for Tics. It is a behavior treatment, not a cure, but a management strategy for kids with tics. So I went through the training, and I'm a certified provider for CBIT. All right, so let's jump in. I want to kind of really go through by case studies. I want to go through three cases to really talk about how we help kids in school, right? So let's jump in and start with Jake. So I don't know if you can read this. This is kind of small. I know some people are on their phone, so I'm going to just read this, right? So Jake is 7, and he's a first grader. And he is, has both vocal tics. His vocal tics are throat clearing and humming, which are pretty common vocal tics. But Jake often, has his vocal tics during quiet reading time in class. And he also sometimes displays his motor tics, and his motor tics are head jerking and eye blinking, are also pretty common tics that we see among kids. And he often does his motor tics during recess when he feels the pressure to socialize, and he feels the pressure that other people might ask him about his tics and why he does this and that. The attention from his tics combined with occasional teasing has made him somewhat withdrawn in a group setting. And Jake's parents have observed that while he is enthusiastic about a school, he does struggle with concentration during longer tests. So this is a child who is doing somewhat okay in school, but he does struggling with, paying attention and concentration focus, right? So how do we help Jake, right? So with this example, I kind of want to talk, just like briefly go over, there are 2 kind of main school accommodations for basically anything, right? There's IEP and there's a 504 plan. And people often ask, like, what is this? Which one is which? And how are they different? How are they the same? Which one should I ask for, when I advocate for my child in school? So the main difference that we really want to know is that IEP is based on a special education law, and 504 is really based on a civil rights law. That's like the key difference between the two. So IEP is to ensure that you receive a good education, but 504 is more about you receiving equal access as someone with disability. So both are for people with disabilities, right? So, but for, and then how do we define disabilities, right? So these two define disability a little differently. So at 504 has a more loose definition, and Tourette syndrome and ADHD would definitely kind of, would be something that a 504 plan would accommodate. However, for kids to have an IEP, no matter what type of disability they have to have a quote unquote educational impact, unquote. So what does that mean? Is that this disorder or disability or something that you have needs to have an impact on your education strong enough that they would give you an IEP, right? So I'm going to give you some examples. So from there, you would know like what would count as educational impact and kind of, become eligible for IEP, and what would just be a 504 plan. So one of the key differences is that a 504 plan, that is a civil rights law. So it gets you equal access, but does not really change the way you receive education, right? So it provides only accommodation, but an IEP provides accommodation and modification, right? What does that mean, right? For example, if the teacher assigns a reading, right? So if the teacher assigns, The Call of the Wild as a book for you to read in your reading class, right? An accommodation would be you're also meeting the same expectation of the other students without compromising or kind of dumbing down the content or making it easier for you. So for example, if everybody else is reading The Call of the Wild, but you are listening to a audiobook of the same version of the book, right? And everybody's kind of like writing a 12-page book report on The Call of the Wild, but instead of writing a 12-page, you're allowed to type it up instead of writing it, but you will still need to write 12 pages just as much as other. That's called an accommodation, right? So that's what a 504 can give you. But what would be a modification? A modification would be everybody's reading The Call of the Wild, but you're reading an illustrated, simplified version or like an abridged version of the book. And everybody else is writing a 12-page paper about it, either by typing or by handwriting. And you just need to give a oral report, simple oral report, or just make a 2-page paper, or just like draw a picture to kind of describe what it meant to you. And that would be a modification. A modification would be like you're making it easier, you're lowering the expectation for the assignment for the student. And another key difference is that a 504 plan, because it's a civil rights law, it's available both in K-12 school and in college and at work, right? So if you have a kid who's going to college or going to work, the workplace or the college needs, and they required by law, they have to provide a 504 plan accommodation for your child, right? Because it's a civil rights law, it doesn't just apply to schools. But IEP is an education law, and it ends as soon as your K-12 education ends, right? So there is no IEP in college or at the workplace. So what do we think? Like, what does Jake need, right? Does Jake's tick, affect him enough that he would have, quote, educational impact, right? So let's kind of really think about it. It really doesn't, right? Like he's not failing class. Like he can finish the same kind of assignment as others, but he does need some accommodation, but not modification. So let's see. This is kind of more explanation of IEP and 504. But they both are free, and they should meet the child needs, and it does require like some kind of documentation of a disability, right? So let's, after knowing that, let's go back to Jake and think about, how do we help a kid like Jake, right? So the main thing is that he does vocal tics during quiet reading time, which means when kids are doing, reading quietly in the first grade classroom, Jake's vocal tic could be, distracting for other people, and people could really hear him because he's doing it. If he does it during recess, maybe he's, like people are kind of less likely to hear him, right? But he is kind of, doing it during quiet reading time, and that is clearly a problem. And he has a lot of motor tics during social situations, like for example during recess or lunch, when he has to socialize people, right? And academically he does struggle with concentration. So with these kind of key information in mind, let's talk about accommodations for Jake, right? So I'm going to go through like 8 accommodations we commonly recommend for kids with tics, right? So the first one is to inform the teachers and student about their TS diagnosis and the uncontrollable nature of the condition, right? So I think this would be the first one, and I recommend this for like anyone or everybody with tics, like, and then the kids who like they do tic in school and their tics are kind of visible, and we recommend this. And then parents like, okay, how do we do this? Well, there are many ways to do this. You can talk, you can, you know, your child can give a presentation, you could talk to the teacher, or someone from the school could come to the class and talk about it. However, I would really want to recommend the wonderful NJCTS people. They have made this like in-service program that I was trained as an in-service provider. So what they do is we go to a school and we kind of put up this it can all be virtual, have this presentation about what Tourette syndrome is and what tics are and how they can't help it, it's uncontrollable. And then they often include like a child as a child who has Tourette syndrome, and they go and then this kid talk to the school about it. And the best part of this, I mean, there are many great things about NJCTS is in service. I'm really, really happy that they're doing this, and many of our clients use their in-service program. So the good thing about it is that, first of all, it's free to you and the school. And the second thing is that the school doesn't even know that they are here for your child, right? It doesn't necessarily. So some parents like, oh, I don't know if my child is really want to be under the spotlight, be like, oh, this whole presentation is here because they want to learn about me. Well, they can say like they're here about you, or they don't even have to say. I mean, I don't know if your child is the only one with Tourette syndrome in your child's school, right? And the third great thing about this is that maybe you're also helping someone else, right? Maybe there's 2 other kids in the same school that also had Tourette syndrome, and they also want some kind of advocacy, right? Or maybe 2 years later, there's like 2 other kids who will come to the school, and now the school knows about this and know how to deal with it. So I really, really recommend this service. But if besides this, you can also kind of do it on your own. But basically the key is to teach, it's really just to let the class and the teachers know that these tics are involuntary, they're uncontrollable, right? So that would be the first thing. The second accommodation I would recommend is to teach Jake communication strategies to self-advocate during social interactions. And so how do we do that, right? We have to really get Jake ready whenever people really like stare at him or ask him like, why do you have to do this? Well, during quiet reading time, he has his humming or his other vocal tics, right? Like, and people will be like, hey, what's going on? And right now we have to make sure Jake is ready with an answer whenever people like ask him or like look at him, right? If he has the pressure to kind of come up with an explanation on a spot, he might kind of be unprepared. So what are some of the ways to help Jake with this, right? So first, we have to help Jake come up with some kind of script, right? Like, like this is what I say. Maybe Jake can say, oh, I have Tourette syndrome, I really can't help it. Or he can say something about, oh, I just have tics, and it's uncontrollable, right? Like, make sure the script includes something about how this is uncontrollable, and he doesn't want to do it, but he can't help it. And then don't just come up with strict, you role play with your child, right? Like, let's pretend that it's during lunch and you're doing your tic, and someone else is like, Jake's in first grade, and a lot of first graders, they're like kids, and they don't like, or they're like, hey, Jake, like, why are you doing this? And then, have Jake role play with you, right? And then you can modify based on the situation, right? And then, sometimes you can think about like, when do you have to explain? When do you not have to explain, right? If you're kind of going somewhere in a grocery store, people are looking at you, but you don't really see these people. You only see them, you're not going to see them ever again. Maybe you don't want to explain. And so Tourette Association has this kind of card that, like sometimes they find that kids in public, they're just over explaining. They have to explain over and over again. So every time, someone look at them or ask them, they're just like, read this card. I don't even want, like, I don't want to talk or anything. Just like, hand out a card to them. And this is also a good way to advocate. All right. Accommodation 3. So this is a really, really important. I think out of all the 8 accommodations, I'm going to talk about this. Accommodation 3 is one of the 2 that are most important. I really want to discuss is planned ignoring of Tourette syndrome symptoms, right? So this would normalize the condition for both Jake and Jake's classroom. What does that mean? Practice plan ignoring means during quiet reading time, when Jake is doing his vocal tics, everybody ignore it. Just pretend nothing is happening. Just like move on. I just keep going. And you're like, hey, like, how can everybody just like ignore it? Well, it takes practice, but believe it or not, once the kids get used to it, they really get used to it. It just really, they don't really pay attention to that, to it all that much. It's been like, normalized, right? So what do we mean by practice planned ignoring? And I want to make it very clear that planned ignoring include, obviously, do not tell the student to stop, because that's not helpful. If you tell them to stop, they can't stop. If they can't stop, it's not tics, right? So do not tell the student to stop. That's obviously, that's very obvious that we don't tell them to stop, because that's just not helpful, right? But also do not comfort the student, right? Some kids are doing tics, and their teachers like, oh, like Jake, you're poor thing, and kind of just become really nice to him. And parents do this too. Parents like, oh my, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Like, do you need a hug? Plan ignoring include do not do that too. Like, do not give them more attention, right? And obviously do not laugh at a student and do not look at a student. Just like don't do anything. And the kids in the classroom are just gonna get used to it. They're really just gonna get used to it, right? So let me explain more about why I said, I mean, we all cannot understand, don't tell the student to stop, right? That's just, because it doesn't work and gives them more pressure. And when they have more anxiety, they tend to take more. So basically don't tell them to stop. But why do we say, don't even comfort them? Like, don't stop being so nice to them when they tic, right? Why do I say that? Like, isn't that a good thing to do? That's actually not a good thing to do. And let me explain this, right? So think about our brain, right? And then kind of only 5% is like really our conscious mind, and we're aware of things that what's going on. And 95% of our brain function, like we don't even know exactly what we're doing, right? A lot of things are automatic, right? So in the 95% unconscious mind, a lot of things go by what happened, and does anything good come out of it or anything bad come out of it? If I do something and then something good happened to me, my unconscious mind is taking notes, be like, last time I did this, something nice happened to me. So do more of that, right? Which means if I had vocal tic, right? And then someone become really nice to me, right? Like mom only pay attention to me when I do this tic. Or, my sister would just let me watch the TV I want to watch when I tic really bad, right? My conscious mind is not thinking, oh, next time when I want to watch TV and I don't want to watch my sister watches, I just want to do it. Or next time when I want mom to hug, I'll just tic. The conscious mind is not thinking about that, right? Like they're not being manipulative or anything. I'm not saying that, right? Because consciously they don't realize this. But unconsciously, our brain's taking notes. Like, last time I did this, mom gave me a hug. So do more of that, right? Last time I tic in during reading, my reading teacher was really nice to me. And she told me that I'm doing so great, and that felt really nice. I want that to happen again. So I'm wondering if I do. So your unconscious mind is doing all this and taking notes, right? So if every time Jake tics, his classmate become super nice to him, his unconscious brain's like, hey, do more of that, because that was good. Like that felt pretty good. And we do not want that to happen. We do not want tic to lead to any benefit for the student, not because we think they're going to be kind of ticking on purpose just to get these things. No, that's not what we're saying at all. But unconsciously, that's going to increase the likelihood of that behavior if they get something out of it. So plan ignoring, super important. That include just simply ignore it. Don't even comfort the student. Don't look at them. Don't tell them to stop. And this include everybody. That include the lunch person, the coach, the after school program person, the music teacher. Everybody in the school needs to be on the same page. And that's why we really recommend this school-wide in-service program, or school-wide or class-wide. So make sure that everybody who, is kind of, it has a chance to be with your child, knows to not to tell them to stop or do anything when they tick, right? So there is just one exception for plan ignoring, right? So because I don't want to make that a blanket statement. There's one caveat, is that if your child is receiving CBID, and so during CBID, there's a period of the treatment when we teach a child a competing response, right? So what we do is that instead of doing the tick, we teach them something else to do when they tick. During this period of the treatment, and only during this period of treatment, the teacher and adults may remind the child to use their competing response when they tick. So this would be the only occasion when you should notice when they tick and should say something about it. What you're going to say is that, hey, remember to use your competing response. And then your CBID therapist is going to tell you what exactly that competing response is and kind of, how to practice, right? This is kind of one exception. Okay. Last accommodation for Jake is kind of also a common one. So one of the most popular 504 or most common 504 accommodation is preferential seating. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, right? And so we have to really think about, so in 504, if you write preferential seating on 504, the teacher required by law has to find a spot in the classroom that works best for your child, and they can choose where they sit, basically, right? And preferential seating often, to other people, like once we hear preferential seating, we often think front and center of the classroom, but that's not necessarily true for kids with Tourette. So what would be a good seat for kids with tics, right? When we say preferential seating, where should we sit the kid in the classroom? So here is a chart, right? Here's a chart, here's a classroom. This is where the teacher stays, and this is like a whiteboard where like they look at us. So everybody is sitting and kind of facing this way. They're facing up, looking at the whiteboard, and there's this door right here, right? So where would be a good seat for Jake, right? A lot of kids with tics, they prefer to sit in the back row. Why? Because they don't want other people to see when they tick, right? It gives them a lot of pressure when they tick, and they know that people are watching them, right? If they sit front and center, everybody can see them, because everybody, like if they sit where Nicole sits, everybody can see Nicole if Nicole ticks, because they're looking at the whiteboard, and Nicole be like, hey, like people can see me, right? So typically we want them to, they would prefer to sit in the back. However, there's one important factor to consider, and that important factor is, does the student struggle with paying attention in class? If they do struggle with paying attention in class, we sit them in the back is not going to be very helpful, right? Because if they struggle with attention and if they sit here by Travis, right? And there's people walking by the door, and then the Travis can see what everybody's doing, and get like Travis can see Frank is making paper airplane, and James playing with his pencil, and then like Travis is gonna get distracted, right? So if your child does not struggle with concentration, and it's fine that they're gonna sit in the back. but Jake does. You know, in the scenario we read, Jake does struggle with paying attention in class. So sitting him in the back is not going to be very helpful. But we also don't want him to sit front and center. Where do we want Jake sit? We want Jake to sit here where Isaiah is, right? Why is this? Because this, you know, like not a lot of people see him, right? Like most people don't see him, only these people, kind of these few people can see him, right? And he's in the front, so he can pay attention, and he's next to the teacher, right? So when we talk about preferential seating, when you kind of advocate for your child, right, you have to really make it clear where would be a preferred seat, right? And so not necessarily front and center. We have to really consider, does the students draw attention, and do they struggle with paying attention? Okay, so these are kind of the 4 accommodations that we kind of pretty commonly used for kids with Tourette's in the classroom, right? Now let's look at another case and see what this kid need, what kind of accommodation this kid would need, right? So I'm gonna read this for people who are driving. So at 9 years of age, Lily is a 3rd grader with a keen interest in science experiments. However, writing assignments present a significant challenge for her. Each time Lily is faced with a writing task, her motor tics are hand flinching and sudden shoulder jerks, and she would do that, right? Due to the noticeable increase in tics during writing activities, Lily often finds herself being directed to leave the classroom. So like whenever she tics a lot, which is often during writing, the teacher would be like, Lily, why don't you take a break? And then the teacher would send her either to the counselor's office or to the nurse's office, right? So beyond the classroom interruption, the crux of Lily's challenge lies in her inability to complete written assignments. Regardless of her understanding of the material or her enthusiasm for a topic, writing became a big barrier for her learning journey. So basically what's happening here is that, and then we see this actually very often in school, is that kids are getting sent out of the classroom when they tic. And is that good for Lily? Is that good for our child? Should they be sent out of the classroom? When should they be sent out of classroom? When should they not be sent out of the classroom, right? So let's look at accommodations for Lily. And this is another one of the 2 most important accommodations for kids with Tourette's, is that we do not encourage students to leave the classroom if the tics are mild, okay? However, if the tics become distracting, we should designate a predetermined safe place. For example, the counselor's office or the nurse's office or wherever in the school building. And remember this line, that's this underlined sentence. The student should always bring their work and complete all assigned tasks in that separate room, right? And we're like, why do we do that? So basically, bottom line is that if they don't have to leave, don't make them leave. You know, keep them in the classroom as much as possible, and just do plan ignoring. However, if this really become very, you know, the kids are like in distress and they really tic a lot, and the tic become really like bad, they can leave the classroom, but they need to bring along all of their assignment and finish the work in the separate location, right? Why do I say that? Again, think about this, right? Think about from Lily's perspective, right? Lily's conscious brain is really like, Lily's frustrated. Like, why can't I finish writing? This is getting so frustrating. Like every time I write, I do my hand flinching my hand flinching tic, and that's like so annoying. Like make my writing really like look really bad. It takes such a long time. I hate this. And the teacher like asked me to leave. This is so embarrassing, right? And then consciously Lily thinking about, this is so embarrassing, like this is so bad, I don't like this. Unconsciously, like Lily doesn't want to do the writing assignment. And if every time she ticks, she gets to get away with assignment, and her unconscious brain is like taking notes, be like, hey, next time you don't want to do writing assignment, just tick, because last time you tick, you didn't have to do a writing assignment. And Lily doesn't even know that her unconscious mind is taking notes about this. And it's like just all happening under, like it's beneath the surface, like under the surface, this is happening, right? So if every time Lily start writing and she ticks, she asks to go to the nurse, and you guys know about the nurses office. Nurses are they are very nice, right? Like they're often like, elementary school nurse, they're very nice, they're very kind, like, you go there, it's like warm and fuzzy. And Lily got out of his writing assignment, basically. And then that's, unconsciously, that is going to increase the chance of his writing, her writing tick happening again, because that writing tick just did something good for her. Just took like, she got out of writing assignment. And this applies at home too, right? When your child is doing homework and they're ticking, what do we do? The same rule applies. When they're ticking mildly, just ignore them. Just don't, just let them be, right? If it becomes really bad, right, you want to say like, take a 5 minutes break, and then but you're still finishing assignment, right? You never want to say, oh, you're taking so badly, like, let me email your teacher, you don't forget about today's assignment. You never want to do that. But I'm not saying your kid is gonna tick because they want to get out of homework, because their conscious mind is like, they don't want to do this. However, unconsciously, that might be happening, right? So you really want to kind of, don't make that happen. Kids should not be getting away with things when they tick, because that might unconsciously increase the chance of the ticks happening more often. Okay, I hope that all kind of makes sense. And this is not us being really cruel, with the kids, that this is all kind of behavior theory, right? This has been scientifically proven that kind of we don't want to do that. I mean, I know we are also not saying like, oh, we're like being really like super too strict about the kids. Like, like we still ask them, we could, like they could still take a 5 minutes break, and they could still go to the nurse office. We're just asking them to take their assignment with them and finish it in the nurse's office. Another accommodation for Lily would be identify stressful situations for Lily, because heightened stress can worsen the tic symptoms. For example, whenever she writes, she becomes very anxious. Whenever she becomes anxious, she tics more, right? Same with Jake. Whenever Jake has to socialize with other people, he becomes anxious, and when he becomes anxious, his motor tics become worse, right? So, and then we teach students ways to manage stress. What does that mean? That means whenever, like before Lily, when Lily is not ticking and when Lily is not doing writing, we teach Lily that, hey, Lily, guess what? We noticed that you really struggle with writing, right? Whenever you're doing writing, it seems like you're really under a lot of pressure, right? And talk to Lily about it. It's like, hey, where do you feel it in your body? Like, notice it. Like, Lily, help Lily notice when she really starts to feel really nervous, right? And teach her relaxation skills, right? Before she get all worked up or get all anxious about writing, or maybe even before writing class, we can get Lily kind of, in the corner, be like, Lily, practice 5 minutes of relaxation skills that your therapist or your counselor, taught you, right? So Lily could kind of really go into the writing class with a kind of a calmer, body and calmer mind, right? So we really have to teach Lily how to manage the stress. And we don't teach her when she's stressed. We teach her when she's not stressed. She's just like, having a good time. I mean, that's when we teach her. And we ask her to practice these relaxation strategies ahead of time before she's about to go into writing. So she could, be less anxious, and she can manage her pressure better when she's doing writing. Okay. Another comment, I'm running short on time, so I'm gonna, speed up. Another accommodation is to simplify or modify challenging tasks that exacerbate the tics. So for Lily, it's writing, right? So what are some of the accommodations that we could do for writing difficulties? Maybe if it's a writing class and it's really teaching them how to write, so maybe we can allow Lily to use technology. So maybe Lily can type instead of doing handwriting, or maybe Lily can use speech to text, right? And then Lily would be talking to a computer and the computer text, and she would just be correcting the errors, right? And then teach her to use a graphic organizer, kind of like, organize her thought before she has to put it down on the paper. And another important one is that do not penalize for poor handwriting. This is really, really important that to put on a 504 plan, is that some teachers penalize for poor handwriting, but poor Lily, right? Like she can't help it, right? Like she does her hand tick when she does writing. So her writing is gonna be like look pretty messy, right? So we need to put it on a 504 plan that Lily does not get penalized for poor handwriting. But if it's not like a writing assignment, right? For example, a lot of other assignments require writing. What if I'm actually learning science and my science teacher is asking me to take lab notes, and that require writing? But the science teacher is actually not testing my writing knowledge, my writing ability. The science teacher is really testing my science knowledge. So in that case, if writing is actually not the goal of the assignment, but simply kind of how the assignment is being delivered, maybe we can change the format so that the knowledge, right? Lily can present her grasp of the content in a different way. Maybe he can make a PowerPoint presentation for the science teacher, or she can do an oral exam with the science teacher. As long as Lily shows that she studied and understood the material, the writing really doesn't really matter in the science class, right? So that's also something to think about. We call that alternative assignment format. I'm gonna speed up. Last accommodation for kids with tics is social emotional support, right? Provide access to counseling or social emotional learning programs to help them, relieve stress. And this is really important for Lily. So I think maybe Lily should really talk to her school counselor and maybe like check in once a week about things, right? About like, how do you feel about writing? And maybe she has some kind of perfectionism going on there that a counselor could really work with her about that. Okay, so last case is gonna be, I just want to give you an example of how when 504 is no longer sufficient and we need to advocate for an IEP. And this will be an example. So Oscar is 12 years old and Oscar has Tourette's and ADHD. So, Oscar has been having 504 plan for a long time, but Oscar is still struggling a lot in school, right? Oscar is failing multiple classes. His assignments are mostly incomplete. He struggles to retain key information. Math is really hard. He found it challenging to focus on multi-step problems, basic operations. Oscar frequently loses track in class and missing out on vital information, right? So for Oscar, when he struggles this much in school, a 504 may not be sufficient for Oscar. And this is when we need to kind of advocate for IEP. But IEP is a much longer process in school. So basically, anyone can refer Oscar and then for evaluation. And parents have to consent to the evaluation. And then the school does a lot of evaluation, like the school tests Oscar in school. And that testing could take, some time to kind of complete. And then after the testing, they're going to look at the scores from the testing and see if Oscar is eligible for special education. And if he's eligible, they're going to write up the IEP and have an IEP meeting and kind of discuss with the parents. And what specifically is going to be in the IEP really depends on all these other factors, especially the evaluation. Maybe during evaluation, they find out that maybe Oscar has a math, related learning disability, right? Or maybe Oscar does not have a math related learning disability. Maybe his ADHD is just so has such educational impact on him that he really, really kind of become disabling for him, right? So, but before I end, I really want to kind of spend some time to talk about testing accommodation, because that I get asked a lot. Do our kids get extra time during tests? That's what, when I get, I get asked a lot of that question. So I want to kind of talk about this case about, testing accommodation. So basically, Amelia is 14 years old. And her motor tics involve sudden jerking movement of her arms and occasionally abrupt hand movement. And during tests, Amelia found herself under additional stress, exacerbating the frequency and intensity of her tics, right? So basically, when she takes an exam, her handwriting is very inconsistent, right? Some words appear clear, other words are almost illegible due to the sudden movement when she's writing, right? At times, she might kind of draw lines across the page by accident, right? And then she's gonna bubble, for multiple choice questions, she needs to bubble in these answers on the Scantron, but she can't bubble in because, or she is gonna mess up the Scantron paper because all of her sudden jerking of her arms, right? So how do we help her, right? What are the possible testing accommodations for that, right? Well, you can really advocate for extended time. So this, where I'm talking, this testing accommodation, it's really different. Depends on if it's an exam in school or if you're taking exam like the ACT and SAT, right? School accommodations are easier to ask for, and the ACT and SAT accommodation are much more difficult to advocate for, right? But asking for school testing accommodation is really step one. So, but because when you submit a kind of testing accommodation request to the college board, they're also going to want to ask the school what the school is doing. So, like asking the school to provide testing accommodation is really your first step. So, because Amelia spent so much longer to write down her answer, she needs extended testing time, right? And because she also has vocal tics, I didn't read that, but Amelia also has vocal tic. She has vocal tic of repeating sounds. So we want her to be testing in a separate location so she doesn't, so other students don't get distracted by her vocal tics, and she doesn't have to worry about distracting other children, right? And she can ask for a scribe or a bubbler. A scribe will write down your answer for you, and the bubbler is gonna bubble in your answers for choice on a Scantron paper, and those are both gonna be very helpful for Amelia. And you can ask for frequent but short breaks, not long breaks, but very short breaks. You can ask for alternative response modes, which is, not available in a SAT exam, but could be available for your science or your social studies exam, right? And you can ask for flexible testing schedule. So maybe Amelia her tics are really bad in the late afternoon. But if you have a math exam or a social studies exam, at 2 o'clock, when she typically tics really bad, could you move it to the next day in the morning, or earlier in the morning when she tics, her tics are better generally. So those are kind of basically what we ask. But asking for but college board and the ACT people, they are a lot more stricter than school. But asking a testing accommodation in school is the first step. So that's it, right? I'm 4 minutes over time. I guess I will still have 10 minutes for questions. If you want to contact me, my email is hui@3ecenter.org. At 3ecenter, I do CBIT, and we something we provide is that we provide 504 parent IEP coaching. So we actually help parents draft emails that they should write to the school about asking for, parents who do I ask even, and we can teach you what do you ask, what accommodation you can ask, and how do you draft the email and all that. And then I also work with the PrEP program. It's an executive functioning coaching program, and we kind of help kids with homework completion. Basically, if that's something you need, to contact me. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jiang. We will now be moving to the questions and answers, and we'll be stopping the recording. For those viewing this recording at a later date, thank you so much for tuning in.